Ladies and gentlemen, the concept of divine protection is deeply rooted in religious and spiritual teachings, and it's one that resonates profoundly when we find ourselves entangled with individuals who are, for lack of a better term, narcissistic. The narcissist's influence can be toxic, insidious, and ultimately destructive. However, there's a profound and often underappreciated truth. God, in His infinite wisdom, sometimes removes us from these relationships, not as an act of punishment, but as a protective measure. First, let's explore the nature of the narcissist. Narcissists operate from a fundamental sense of insecurity and self-centeredness, seeking validation at the expense of others. Their behavior is often erratic, manipulative, and emotionally draining. In a way, they are like parasites, drawing energy from those around them without giving anything substantial in return. The narcissist's primary concern is their own inflated sense of self, which they maintain through controlling others and using them as instruments of their own emotional survival. This dynamic creates a power imbalance where one person is constantly giving and the other is constantly taking until, inevitably, the well of resources runs dry. Now consider the larger spiritual perspective. God's plan for us, as laid out in many religious traditions, is not one of perpetual suffering. It is one of growth, transformation, and the pursuit of a higher good. The act of pulling us away from toxic relationships is therefore not just a physical distancing, but a spiritual act of protection. It is God's way of safeguarding our emotional and psychological integrity, recognizing that in such an environment, we cannot fully flourish. The narcissist, for all their charms and manipulative tactics, creates a reality where love is conditional, self-esteem is shattered, and emotional safety is non-existent. For someone on a spiritual journey, this is a destructive force, undermining one's very essence. God, in His protection, understands this well and intervenes. But why does it take so long for us to recognize the need for this divine intervention? This is a question many of us grapple with, especially when we are deeply embedded in the relationship with the narcissist. The reality is that the emotional and psychological bonds we form in such toxic relationships can be incredibly strong, in part because narcissists are skilled at making us feel needed, special, or even loved. Their love is often conditional, transactional, and manipulative, but it feels like affection. This is what makes it so difficult to extricate oneself. But herein lies the crucial role of divine protection. The removal from the relationship often occurs when the pain of remaining in it outweighs the fear or uncertainty of leaving. God, in this sense, orchestrates a series of events or internal realizations that gradually strip away the veils of illusion, allowing us to see the true nature of the relationship. In the context of divine protection, we have to recognize that God doesn't just remove the narcissist from our lives, He also protects us from ourselves. We are often complicit in allowing such relationships to continue because of our own psychological wounds or unmet needs. There is an unconscious draw towards toxicity when we are operating from a place of low self-worth or unresolved trauma. The narcissist, recognizing this vulnerability, exploits it, offering a distorted version of love and validation that temporarily fills the void but never truly heals it. God's protection, therefore, isn't just about removing a toxic individual. It's about giving us the space to heal and grow. This space allows us to reconnect with our authentic self, to rediscover our worth and value outside of the narcissist's distorted lens. It gives us the opportunity to build a stronger relationship with ourselves, grounded in self-respect and self-love. Two things that a narcissist can never provide. God's intervention may seem harsh or sudden, but it is an act of mercy. It is the protection of our soul, our mental health, and our long-term spiritual well-being. What God is offering then is not just relief from the immediate harm of the narcissist, but the opportunity for deep and lasting transformation. Without this intervention, we might remain stuck in patterns of self-sacrifice, manipulation, and psychological warfare, never truly understanding the extent to which we have been compromised. But with divine protection, we are freed. And that freedom is the key to beginning again on a path that leads not just away from the narcissist, but towards something better, something real, something that resonates with the truth of who we are and the purpose for which we were created. This is the essence of God's protection. It is not just about escaping the clutches of toxic relationships. It is about setting us free to become who we were always meant to be, unburdened by the manipulations of those who sought only to keep us in bondage. Narcissism is a term that gets thrown around quite a bit these days, but it's important to understand it in a deeper psychological sense. It's not just about vanity or self-centeredness in the superficial sense. It's a profound distortion of the self, one that runs so deep that it manifests in every aspect of a person's behavior. Narcissism, at its core, is a defense mechanism, a way of compensating for a fragile sense of self-worth. The narcissist doesn't feel secure in their own identity. They don't feel that they have inherent value or significance. Instead, they rely on external validation to shore up their fragile ego. They need others to affirm their worth, and when they don't receive that affirmation, they become enraged, manipulative, and cruel. This need for constant validation is the hallmark of narcissism. A narcissist can never love someone in the truest sense of the word, because love, as it is genuinely experienced, requires a certain level of vulnerability, humility, and self-awareness. The narcissist is incapable of these qualities because their entire existence revolves around the maintenance of their ego. They view relationships as transactional. What can they gain from you, and what can they extract to feed their sense of self-importance? The concept of mutual respect, shared growth, and true emotional connection doesn't compute for them. In a relationship with a narcissist, the other person becomes an extension of their own need for admiration, and any genuine affection is ultimately selfishly motivated. In contrast, healthy love is built on a foundation of respect, trust, and the willingness to be vulnerable with another person. Healthy love is not transactional, it's transformative. It involves two people coming together not to extract something from each other, but to offer something that enhances the other person's life. In a truly loving relationship, there is a sense of mutuality, a recognition that both individuals are equal participants in the growth of the relationship. Healthy love is not about manipulating, controlling, or demanding admiration. It's about nurturing, supporting, and growing together as individuals and as a couple. To understand this, we need to look at what love really is. Love, in the healthiest sense, is not just an emotion. It's a choice, an ongoing decision to value the other person for who they are, not for what they can provide. This is the difference between narcissistic love and the genuine article. Narcissistic love is self-serving. It only exists as long as the narcissist gets what they need. When the narcissist feels that the other person is no longer fulfilling their emotional or psychological needs, they discard them, often without a second thought. There is no genuine care or concern for the other person's well-being, because for the narcissist, the only thing that matters is their own. Healthy love, on the other hand, isn't contingent on constant validation. It's rooted in a deeper sense of commitment to the other person's growth and happiness. A healthy partner doesn't see the relationship as a way to fill their own void or enhance their ego. Rather, they see the relationship as a space where both partners can thrive, encourage each other, and face the world together. They love the other person because they are a whole, unique individual, not because they reflect or inflate the partner's sense of self-worth. This is where vulnerability comes in. In a healthy relationship, vulnerability is not seen as weakness, it is seen as strength. It takes courage to be vulnerable because it requires exposing one's true self with all of its flaws, insecurities, and imperfections. The narcissist can't do this because their entire persona is built on the illusion of perfection. To expose their true selves would mean confronting the abyss of their own inadequacy and shame, a terrifying prospect. In a healthy relationship, both partners are able to share their fears, insecurities, and hopes with each other, knowing that they will be accepted and loved in return. This mutual vulnerability creates a deeper bond than anything that can be built on superficial admiration or self-serving gestures. Healthy love also involves a level of emotional maturity that narcissists lack. Emotional maturity means being able to understand and manage one's own emotions while also being attuned to the emotions of others. It means being able to have difficult conversations, to accept responsibility for one's actions, and to be willing to make sacrifices for the good of the relationship. Narcissists, by contrast, are emotionally immature. They are reactive, volatile, and incapable of seeing beyond their own needs. When conflicts arise, they cannot engage in healthy dialogue or find resolutions that benefit both parties. They escalate, manipulate, and avoid responsibility, leaving the other person feeling drained, confused, and emotionally depleted. At its essence, the difference between narcissism and healthy love is this. Narcissism is rooted in fear, insecurity, and control, while healthy love is rooted in respect, vulnerability, and the shared growth of both partners. The narcissist love is a desperate attempt to maintain an inflated sense of self, while healthy love is the recognition that two people can come together, not to complete each other, but to enhance each other's lives in ways that are both profound and beautiful. In the end, true love is not something that demands or extracts. It is something that gives and nurtures. And that, I think, is the key to understanding why the two are so fundamentally different. Self-worth is an essential concept in our psychological and spiritual lives. It's the foundation upon which we build our understanding of who we are, and it plays a central role in how we interact with the world and others. The significance of self-worth becomes even more evident when we consider its relationship to healing, particularly after we've been involved in toxic or narcissistic relationships. In these environments, our self-worth is often under constant assault, and the path to healing is, in many ways, the path to reclaiming that inherent value that we might have forgotten or allowed others to strip away. Let's first address what self-worth truly means. It's not simply about self-esteem or how we feel about ourselves in a superficial way. It is, at its core, an intrinsic sense of value, the recognition that we are worthy of respect, love, and care, independent of external validation or approval. This sense of self-worth is shaped by our beliefs, our actions, and our ability to see ourselves as valuable in the face of life's challenges. It is a deep, often subconscious understanding that we matter, that we have inherent dignity and purpose, regardless of what others might think or say about us. When we become entangled with narcissistic individuals, however, this sense of self-worth is often put to the test. Narcissists prey upon vulnerabilities in others, and one of the most insidious tactics they employ is the undermining of their victim's sense of value. Through manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional abuse, they distort the way we see ourselves, leading us to question our worth and our place in the world. They make us doubt our perceptions, invalidate our feelings, and reduce us to mere objects of their needs. Over time, the relationship can cause profound damage to our sense of self, eroding the very foundation of our emotional and psychological resilience. The first step in healing from such a relationship is the painful yet necessary act of reclaiming our self-worth. This is no small task. We must begin by recognizing that our value is not dependent on how others treat us, and certainly not dependent on how a narcissist treats us. It is rooted in something far deeper. We must confront the painful reality that we allowed ourselves to be treated as less than we are, and acknowledge the ways in which we lost ourselves in the relationship. This is not about self-blame, but rather about self-awareness. The awareness that we allowed our worth to be compromised in the first place. The process of healing begins with a conscious decision to break free from the narratives that others have constructed about us. Narcissists have an uncanny ability to make us feel small, insignificant, and unworthy of love. They create an illusion where we are constantly chasing after their approval, never quite able to measure up. But healing requires that we begin to write our own narrative. A narrative in which we are worthy, in which we are loved, not because of anything we do to please others, but because of who we are in our essence. This doesn't happen overnight. Healing is a gradual process, and it requires tremendous patience and self-compassion. One of the first steps in healing is learning to set boundaries. Narcissists are notorious for violating boundaries, and without strong boundaries, we are prone to continually sacrificing our own needs for the sake of others, particularly those who are emotionally manipulative. Learning to set healthy boundaries is an essential part of reclaiming our sense of self. It's a statement to the world that we are no longer willing to tolerate behavior that diminishes us. Boundaries are not just walls to protect us from others, they are declarations of self-respect. They say, I matter, and my needs are just as important as anyone else's. Another crucial aspect of healing is reconnecting with ourselves on a deeper level. Narcissistic relationships often leave us disconnected from who we truly are. We become so preoccupied with pleasing the narcissist, with managing their emotional needs, that we lose sight of our own. Healing involves rediscovering the things that make us unique, our passions, our interests, and our goals. It means taking the time to listen to our own inner voice, to understand what we truly want out of life, and to honor those desires. Healing involves rediscovering our own strength, and in doing so, we restore our sense of self-worth. Part of this healing process is also about forgiveness, not necessarily for the narcissist, but for ourselves. When we have been involved in a toxic relationship, it's easy to fall into the trap of self-blame. We ask ourselves why we didn't leave sooner, why we allowed the mistreatment to continue. But forgiveness is not about excusing bad behavior. It is about releasing ourselves from the burden of guilt and shame. It's about acknowledging that we were human, that we made mistakes, but that we are worthy of love and healing regardless. As we heal, we also begin to reframe our perspective on relationships. Healthy relationships are those in which both partners support each other's growth and individuality, not those that demand conformity or validation at the expense of personal well-being. Healing allows us to understand that we deserve relationships built on mutual respect, trust, and care. We no longer settle for relationships that diminish us. Instead, we begin to attract and nurture those that align with our true worth. Through all of this, self-worth is not just a psychological concept. It is a spiritual reality. It is the understanding that we are created with inherent dignity, that we have purpose beyond the destructive forces of narcissism, and that our worth is not contingent upon the approval of others. Healing, therefore, is not just a process of emotional recovery. It is a journey of returning to our authentic, divine selves, a return to the truth that we are, in the deepest sense, worthy. Trusting God's timing is one of the most challenging yet profoundly transformative aspects of spiritual growth. We live in a world where everything is measured in terms of immediacy. Instant gratification is the cultural norm. Whether it's the speed of technology, the pace of communication, or the expectation of results, we have become accustomed to things happening now. In this context, trusting that there is a divine timing, an unfolding of events that is far beyond our limited understanding, can feel deeply counterintuitive. Yet this trust is not only essential for spiritual maturity, but also for emotional and psychological well-being. The modern world has created a sense of urgency where everything must be rushed. We are taught to strive constantly to push forward without pause, to be relentless in our pursuits. This sense of urgency, however, often leads to burnout, frustration, and dissatisfaction. It's a pressure that clouds our judgment and distorts our perception of what truly matters. In contrast, the divine timing that God operates under is not rushed. It is deliberate, purposeful, and deeply connected to the rhythm of our lives and the growth we undergo in each moment. This divine timing is often in direct opposition to our own desires for control. We want things to happen when we want them to happen, and we become upset when things don't go according to our plans. There's a powerful, almost addictive pull to this, because we feel as though we are in control when we can make things happen on our own terms. But this is an illusion. In truth, control is often an impediment to growth. When we try to force things, when we seek to rush the process, we inadvertently create unnecessary tension and resistance in our lives. This is where learning to trust God's timing becomes so important. It is a surrender to something greater than our immediate desires and anxieties. There's also a deep psychological element to trusting God's timing. As human beings, we are conditioned by our ego to believe that we know best. We believe that our plans and strategies will lead us to the happiness or success we crave, but in reality, many of our plans are misguided, even if they seem sensible on the surface. God, in His wisdom, sees the larger picture. He knows what we truly need, even when we cannot see it ourselves. He understands the intricate interplay of timing, opportunity, and preparation that we might overlook. Trusting God's timing is about accepting that though we may not understand the path ahead, it is unfolding according to a divine plan that will ultimately lead us where we need to go, even if it's not on the timeline we would choose. But why does God's timing often seem delayed or even completely out of sync with our desires? It's because God is not merely concerned with the destination, He is also concerned with the journey, the process by which we evolve into the people capable of handling the blessings or responsibilities He has in store for us. This is perhaps the hardest part of learning to trust. We are often not ready for what we desire. We may think we are prepared, but in truth we have not yet developed the strength wisdom or humility to fully appreciate or manage what we are asking for. God's timing in this sense is a form of grace, a process that shapes us and prepares us to receive what is best for us, even if it's not in the form we anticipated. It's also important to recognize that our impatience with God's timing can often stem from fear and insecurity. We fear that we will miss out on something, that opportunities will pass us by, or that we are being left behind. These fears are deeply ingrained in us, partly because of societal pressures and partly because of our own desires for control. However, when we learn to trust in God's timing, we begin to see that what is meant for us will never pass us by. God's plan for us is not subject to the whims of chance or circumstance. It is rooted in His infinite wisdom, and nothing can alter that. This understanding is profoundly liberating. It frees us from the anxiety of rushing, of feeling as though we are falling behind, and it allows us to rest in the assurance that everything will come together in its due time. Trusting God's timing also teaches us patience, which is not simply the act of waiting passively. Patience in this context is an active engagement with the present moment. It is about cultivating the wisdom to understand that while we may not have what we want right now, what we have in this moment is precisely what we need for our growth. Every moment contains an opportunity for learning, for development, and for preparation. By trusting that this moment is valuable, we are able to embrace it rather than longing for a future that has not yet arrived. There's a deep psychological and spiritual maturity that comes with accepting the fact that we cannot rush the process of our lives. It's a humbling realization, but it's also empowering. When we trust God's timing, we acknowledge that there is a force greater than ourselves at work in our lives. We don't have to control everything. We don't have to strive endlessly. We simply have to do the work in front of us with diligence and faith, knowing that in time, what is meant to be will unfold. The peace that comes with this understanding is immeasurable. It allows us to step into the unknown with courage and with the confidence that no matter the circumstances, we are being guided toward what is truly best for us. In the end, learning to trust God's timing is not about passive resignation to fate. It is about engaging actively with the present, knowing that our growth, our healing, and our ultimate fulfillment depend on the unfolding of events that God has orchestrated for us in His perfect timing. This trust is a cornerstone of faith and an essential part of the spiritual journey. When we experience the upheaval of being removed from a toxic relationship, particularly one with a narcissist, it's easy to feel as though we've been left adrift, untethered in the storm of life. There's a sense of loss, of confusion, and even fear of the unknown. Yet what comes next? After we've endured the pain of separation, after we've been distanced from the toxic dynamics that once held us, presents an extraordinary opportunity. It is the opportunity to step into a new path, one that is guided not by the destructive forces of the past, but by the transformative power of growth, healing, and self-discovery. Embracing this new path requires courage, resilience, and a deep trust in the process of transformation. The first thing to understand is that the new path is not simply a continuation of the old. It's easy to think that after a relationship like that, we're just going to pick up the pieces and move forward, but it's not quite that simple. The process of separating from a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a romantic partner, a family member, or a close friend, leaves a deep imprint on the psyche. You are not the same person you were before. The emotional wounds may be invisible, but they are real, and they must be acknowledged in order for the healing to begin. So what happens next? The first phase of this new path is about recovery. Recovery from the emotional manipulation, the gaslighting, the trauma. And recovery is not about rushing toward a cure or trying to erase the past. It's about allowing the wounds to heal at their own pace. This is a crucial distinction. In a world where we are conditioned to think that emotional suffering should be quickly alleviated, it can be difficult to sit with pain and discomfort, but healing requires us to slow down, to be present with ourselves, to understand the impact of the relationship we've left behind. This is the first step on the new path, confronting the reality of what has happened, taking stock of the emotional toll it has exacted, and allowing ourselves to feel what we need to feel without rushing to suppress or deny the emotions that come to the surface. During this recovery phase, we must also begin to rebuild our sense of self. Narcissistic relationships, by their very nature, wear down your identity. They make you question your worth, your perceptions, and your value. The narcissist's need for control often leaves you in a state of constant self-doubt, undermining your confidence and sense of autonomy. The new path involves rediscovering who you are, apart from the chaos and manipulation of the narcissist. This is a critical juncture, one that requires deep introspection. It's not just about trying to move on from the past, but rather about returning to yourself, finding your true identity again, and understanding that you are worthy of respect and love as you are. You begin to rebuild your life not on the shaky foundation of external validation, but on the solid ground of self-respect and inner strength. As you heal and recover, the new path also involves reclaiming your autonomy and your ability to make choices that align with your true desires and values. The narcissist may have tried to dictate your actions, choices, and thoughts, making you feel as though your autonomy was always compromised. The new path is one of empowerment. It's about learning to trust your judgment again, to listen to your intuition, and to make decisions based on what is best for you, not on what pleases or feeds the narcissist. This is not just about physical independence. It's about emotional and psychological freedom. You are no longer bound by the patterns of manipulation and control. You are free to live your life on your terms. However, embracing your new path also involves facing a significant challenge: fear of the unknown. When you've been in a narcissistic relationship, you often lose touch with your own sense of agency and power. You are conditioned to rely on the narcissist for direction, even if that direction was ultimately destructive. The new path involves stepping into uncharted territory, and this can be terrifying. It's a leap of faith. But it's also an opportunity to embrace the unknown, to take risks, and to trust that even though you may not have all the answers, the journey itself will reveal the path forward. It's about becoming comfortable with uncertainty and recognizing that the discomfort you feel now is a sign of growth, not stagnation. Moreover, embracing this new path means reconnecting with your values and the things that bring you joy and fulfillment. Narcissistic relationships often leave us disconnected from our true desires. We become so focused on pleasing the narcissist and managing their needs that we forget what truly matters to us. The new path is about rediscovering what you love, what excites you, what fills you with a sense of purpose. It's about revisiting the activities, passions, and interests that once brought you joy and embracing them again without guilt or hesitation. This process of reconnecting with your passions is a critical part of reclaiming your life. It signals to yourself that you are worthy of joy, of fulfillment, and of pursuing what makes you happy. And finally, embracing your new path involves developing healthier relationships moving forward. After breaking free from the toxicity of a narcissistic dynamic, it's easy to become cynical or fearful of trusting others. But this new path is not about isolation. It's about fostering relationships that are based on mutual respect, understanding, and care. It's about learning to set healthy boundaries, to recognize the signs of emotional manipulation, and to choose relationships that support your growth and well-being. You no longer settle for toxic connections because you've learned to recognize your worth and the importance of nurturing relationships that align with your authentic self. In summary, what happens next after leaving a narcissistic relationship is not a quick fix, but a profound journey. It's a process of recovery, self-discovery, empowerment, and growth. Embracing your new path requires the courage to face your wounds, the patience to heal, and the strength to step into the unknown. It's a journey of rediscovering who you are and what you truly want from life, and it's a path that leads to freedom. Freedom from the past, and freedom to live the life that you were always meant to live. Building stronger relationships with God and with others is a foundational principle of personal growth and well-being. In a world increasingly marked by division, disconnection, and individualism, the need for deep, meaningful relationships, whether with the divine or with fellow human beings, is more crucial than ever. Yet this is not a simple task. It requires intentionality, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the difficulties that come with authentic connection. Both relationships with God and with others require that we actively engage, not just passively wish for harmony, and that we cultivate certain virtues within ourselves. First, let's address the relationship with God. It's a relationship that is not always straightforward, as it transcends the limits of human comprehension. This relationship begins with acknowledging the mystery of existence. the enormity of the unknown, and the reality that we are not the ultimate authority on our lives. One of the first barriers to a deeper connection with God is the desire for control. Human beings naturally crave certainty, and when faced with the mysteries of life and the universe, we want answers that fit neatly into our preconceived notions. However, God's ways often operate on a higher level that we cannot immediately grasp. Trusting in God's plan, whether or not we understand it, is a powerful act of faith and surrender. Building a stronger relationship with God, therefore, begins with a humble acceptance that we do not have all the answers and that we must learn to listen rather than demand. Prayer and meditation are vital aspects of this process. Prayer is not simply about asking for things. It is about being open to divine guidance, being receptive to the voice of God, and offering gratitude for the gifts that we have, even when life seems difficult. In this way, prayer becomes an act of humility, a way of recognizing that we are not independent, but rather part of a larger, divinely orchestrated reality. It is through this daily practice of humility and receptivity that we grow closer to God and learn to align our will with His. But building a strong relationship with God also requires that we face the dark parts of ourselves, the parts that we would prefer to ignore. There is a psychological element to faith. It's not just about believing in God's existence or following rituals. It's about engaging with the depths of our own souls. We must confront our failings, our flaws, and our sins in the light of divine love. This requires courage because it's easier to hide from God's truth than it is to confront it head on. But it is through this confrontation that we are transformed. Just as in a therapeutic relationship, healing can only begin when we are willing to be vulnerable and honest with God, acknowledging our shortcomings and seeking guidance for change. This process of building a relationship with God also requires that we align our actions with our beliefs. It's one thing to pray and say the right words, but it's another thing entirely to live in a way that reflects our faith. This means acting with integrity, treating others with kindness and respect, and seeking to live in accordance with the values that God calls us to embody. In this sense, a relationship with God is not passive. It requires constant effort, just as any meaningful relationship does. Now, let's turn to building stronger relationships with others. The foundation of any healthy relationship, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, is trust. Trust, however, is not something that is automatically granted. It must be earned through consistent, dependable actions. This is where many relationships falter. We live in a time where relationships often remain superficial, with individuals not taking the time to truly get to know one another or offer their genuine selves. The modern world encourages us to be increasingly self-absorbed and self-sufficient, to put on a facade of independence and strength. But true intimacy, the kind that builds lasting relationships, requires vulnerability. It requires that we open ourselves up, that we risk being hurt or misunderstood, and that we show up for others when they need us most. The key to any strong relationship is mutual respect. This involves recognizing the inherent value of the other person and treating them as an equal, regardless of differences. Often, we struggle with relationships because we focus too much on what we want or need from the other person rather than considering what they might need from us. Strong relationships require that we engage in the relationship for the mutual benefit of both parties. We must seek to understand, not just to be understood. We must listen actively, empathize with others' pain, and celebrate their successes as if they were our own. In this way, we forge bonds that are not based on self-interest, but on the genuine desire to see the other person flourish. Another essential component of building stronger relationships is communication. Healthy communication is an art, and it is one that many people fail to master. We often assume that we know what others are thinking, or we communicate through passive-aggressive behavior or indirect signals. But true communication requires clarity, honesty, and the willingness to express our needs and boundaries in a way that is respectful and compassionate. It also requires that we create a space where others feel safe to do the same. Relationships, both with God and with others, thrive when communication is open, transparent, and rooted in a mutual desire for growth and understanding. Furthermore, strong relationships are built on shared values and experiences. In both our relationship with God and with others, we must seek alignment in what truly matters. With God, this means striving to live in accordance with His will, seeking to embody His teachings in every area of life. With others, it means cultivating relationships with people who share similar principles, values, and goals, while also embracing the diversity that different perspectives bring. Building relationships with those who are aligned with your values helps you to grow together, face challenges as a team, and support each other's development. Ultimately, building stronger relationships with God and others is not about perfection. It's about the continual process of striving to become the best version of yourself, living with integrity, and offering love and compassion to those around you. It's about creating an environment of mutual respect, empathy, and growth. It's about learning to be vulnerable, to listen deeply, and to act with sincerity. This process takes time, effort, and commitment, but the rewards are immeasurable. These relationships enrich our lives, bring us peace, and allow us to become who we were always meant to be, connected, loving, and aligned with a higher purpose.